2 years ago when I was setting up my new workshop, I made an MFT worktop to sit on a large table frame that I'd also made from some salvaged pine. Links to those videos will be in the description box. The plan was to use the MFT table for ripping down sheet goods and also for assembling projects. Meanwhile, I'd use my other smaller workbench as my main workbench for things like hand tool work, cutting joinery, and basically everything else. But I soon realised after using the space that the MFT table was really where I wanted to be working, so I ended up moving all of my tools around and started using it as my main workbench, while the old workbench mainly just functioned as an outfeed table for my table saw. And even though I had thought that having the functionality of an MFT would be really useful to me, after using it maybe 2 or 3 times, I soon realised that using an MFT just wasn't for me, and I'll explain why later in the video. So I want to swap it out for a solid wood workbench top, which I'm going to make using some salvaged pine. These beams here I think used to be roof joists for an outbuilding that was demolished. They're about 170 by 75 millimeters or 7 by 3 inches, so really thick and chunky. I also got some of these salvaged 4x2s from the same place, which were covered in an impressive amount of bird poo. On the beams there was one rotten woodwormy area, but generally not too bad other than lots of holes to fill. So my plan here is basically to put these 4x2s in between each of the beams, and that should give me just enough material. The capacity of my planer is 260 millimeters, so I should be able to do this in 4 separate glue ups. 1, 2, 3 and 4. I'll get the excess length chopped off the ends first, and you might notice here that dust is flying everywhere and I'm holding my breath, and that's because unfortunately my main extractor is out of action at the moment following a recent overheating incident which I talked about in a previous vlog video, so I'm going to need to tackle this project without my main extractor. I'm using magnets just to check that I haven't missed any metal before running these through my machines, and then I can start getting a straight face on each board. Then I can get one of the edges on each board square to that face. Doing these 4x2s was easy, but the beams were much more difficult to manoeuvre on this small machine because they're really heavy. It would have been handy to have an extra pair of hands really, and this caused some issues which I'll talk about later in the video. I had to try and set the height of the planer so that the workbench would catch each piece on the way out, as otherwise the planer would want to tip over from the weight of the beams. Then with the 4x2s only I ran each piece through the thicknesser to get the opposite face trued up. Everything looked nice and square at this point. So I can get them all glued up. And several hours later I got them out of the clamps, and I want to get rid of this dried up glue before running these bits through my machines again. I can trim off the excess from the 4x2s at the table saw. And then I run each piece through the thicknesser to clean up what will be the top side of the workbench top. I'm going to prep these leftover bits of 4x2 as well so that I can add just a little bit more width to the top. Neither of these bits are long enough though, so I'm going to need to splice them together. For the rest of the milling I'm going to use the in-out method, which is basically where you alternate which way you feed each edge through the planer to give complementary angles. So even if your fence is out of square slightly, they'll all still come together perfectly. So for example, for this edge it says in, so I need to flip this and face it inwards towards the fence, and then the next one will be out from the fence, and so on. Not sure I explained that very well, so I'll leave a link to another video for more detail in the description box. So I've got those boards laid out now, and to be honest I wasn't happy with how that milling went at all. I think it's the combination of having a small inexpensive machine and long heavy pieces of timber. The machine tends to wobble a bit and you can't really get the perfect results that you would want to. So you can see I've got some fairly large gaps in the middle and at the ends of the boards as well. It's not that I'm wanting absolute perfection, this is just a workbench top, but these joints definitely need some work, so I'm going to mark up the areas with a pencil and make some adjustments with a hand plane and get these fitting better than they are currently. So about 15 minutes with the hand plane, and they're fitting together better now. Not perfect, and I will have some gaps to fill, but this will be okay, I think. For the glue up, I've got these straight bits of metal from an old table frame, and I can use these to pull the boards into alignment and get it as flat as possible, one on each end, before tightening up the clamps. Here's those other bits of 4x2, and I'm cutting a 45-degree angle so that they sit together nicely. Well, nicer than a butt joint anyway. This screw in the end is going in where the ends will get cut away later. Once that's dry, I can then square up the ends, and because this is about 65mm thick, I need to make that cut in 2 passes, flipping the top in between, and it was really heavy. This is pine wood filler that I'm just rubbing in to fill any gaps and hollow knots. And I'm checking with my longest level to see how the glue up went, and it looks okay. It's never going to be perfect, well, not in my experience anyway. There'll always be some adjustments needed, and I use a pencil to show the high spots. I also used those bits of metal again as winding sticks to sight the top through. These will help to highlight any twist in the top, but it looks pretty good. I just need to get those high spots with some hand planing. I'm going to plug all of the old holes with some dowels. Fortunately, I had some the right size, and a few areas I needed to drill them out before plugging them. Then for this rotten bit, I'm going to try and splice in a new piece of wood, so I'm using a spiral upcut bit in the router just to remove the bad bits. And I'm going to use masking tape to make a rubbing template so that I can transfer it onto a new piece of pine. I forgot to hit record when cutting it out of the bandsaw, so here's a reconstruction. I'm removing the old finish so that the wood glue can adhere, and then I do a test fit, and it's pretty good and snug. Then I'm unleashing the big boy belt sander, which is going to help get things even flatter and smooth too. First with 80 grit and then 120. I'm going to add a round over to the top edges just to soften them a bit. And then it's on to finishing, and I wanted to use up some stuff at the back of the cupboard for this that's been kicking around for a few years. This is white wood dye, and I thought I'd try mixing it with some India ink to get a nice grey colour to match the floor. Unfortunately, it wasn't as translucent as I was hoping for. This is how it looked when dry. I think I should have watered it down a bit, as I really wanted to see more of the wood grain than this. But anyway, I denibbed and then applied 2 coats of hard wax oil over the top. It's a shame I didn't really like how it looked, but this is a workbench top. It's going to end up getting messy anyway, and in a few years I'll have to sand it back again, and then I can try something different. The underside got 2 coats of hard wax oil, just to make sure it doesn't absorb moisture from the air and bend out of shape. Did I mention this thing was really heavy? Oh, and the workbench bases too. The old top was secured with screws toe-nailed in through the frame. I can also get the casters removed, and these razor blocks that I added previously removed too, just to reduce the height of the workbench back down to a level that I'm more used to, and get the new top in place with some help from my lovely assistant, the muscles of our relationship. And that's it done, ready for use and abuse. So aside from the stain, which by the way I mainly added because I don't like when pine starts to turn orange with age, I think this top is going to serve me well, probably for the rest of my life I should imagine. And the MFT had to go for a few reasons. One, obviously I didn't use it. Everyone is different, and I know a lot of people who love their MFTs and use them for all sorts of clever wizardry. But for me, it just felt a bit fiddly and clunky, and it sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of woodworking. Plus, I felt like it slowed me down. It was too much messing around. Two, I got so sick and tired of losing screws and small things down all of those holes. And three, as a main workbench, a thin sheet of MDF really didn't function well. It's much nicer to have something more solid and chunky that I can really hammer down on. Having said that, this is pine, it's a softwood, so it's going to look scruffy very quickly, but I can resurface it every few years once it gets in too much of a state. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to be adding some brilliant work holding capabilities to this workbench, and that's part of the reason why I'm laying on it in this manner now, because I want to hide that from you and save that for the next one. So please subscribe if you haven't already for more. As for the old MFT top, well, it came in handy for a while as a temporary doggy barrier. If you'd like to help support the channel, plus get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos, you'll find links to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership in the description box below. Thank you for watching.